Assalamu alaikum. So welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about the most powerful technique to learn the Arabic language. And to be honest, it's the most obvious, but it's the one that people neglect, which is immersion. And what is immersion? Immersion is basically spending as much time as possible with that language. I did touch upon this in my last video, and I think I need to go into it further because there were still some questions being asked. So questions being asked are like, don't you have to be in the country to do immersion? The answer is no. You can create an immersive environment from wherever you are just using the internet. And I would argue that these days it could actually be better. Meaning that you could have something playing in your ears 24/7, and normally in a normal day, even in the target language country, you won't be getting spoken to 24/7. So you could technically get more immersion and more input at home in the country where you are than being in your target language country. Number two is that I would argue that it could be better in terms of you can target exactly what you want to listen to and what you need. So depending on your level, you can target what level you want, and you can also target maybe domains of the language that you're weaker in, like different subjects of the language that you want to get stronger in and build vocab in those subjects. So immersion is basically just creating an immersive environment based around input. Input meaning listening, reading, or maybe watching something. If you're watching a documentary or whatever, that's still input. And this works on the premise of how we learn our native language. We didn't learn our native language, actually, we acquired it. When you're a child, you're not taught these grammatical structures. You are just naturally picking up the language. You're not made to sit there and memorize lists of vocab. You just naturally acquire the vocab. And this acquisitional learning is the most natural form of learning. And it's the strongest form of learning a language because it builds a very strong subconscious model of the language. For example, if your native language is English and a non-native English speaker who was maybe learning English came and spoke to you and he said, I have white 3 shirts. You as a native English speaker would know that's wrong. You would say, I have 3 white shirts. So when you explain to him and you say, you don't say it like that, you say, I have 3 white shirts. If he says, why? Like, I'm still just explaining the shirts, I'm describing the shirts. The shirts are white and I have 3 of them, so I have white 3 shirts. The most you're going to be able to tell him is, it's just wrong. And that's because you acquired the English language. And it's that strong that you don't even know why it's wrong. You don't know the grammatical rule why that's wrong. You just know it's wrong. This is the aim behind immersion learning. Your target language, you want to develop a strong subconscious model of it that is actually accurate to the language. And it's not, it's not influenced by your native language bias, which I'm going to get onto. So how do we immerse? There are different types of immersion. There is active immersion, there is free flow immersion, and there is passive immersion. And all 3 of these types can be used tactically. So first, active immersion. Active immersion is where you're immersing in your target language, whether you're listening to an audiobook or you're watching a documentary or whatever it is you're doing, any kind of input you're doing, reading a book maybe. Active immersion is where you're actively, fully concentrating on your input and your sentence mining. Sentence mining meaning words that you don't know, you'll pick them out, you'll look up the meaning, and then you'll put them into Anki. Anki, I spoke about before, is a SRS, space repetition system, maybe it's called. It's an app basically that you put vocab in, or you can put vocab in, and it has an algorithm and it'll show you the words that you need to know more often, and it'll show you the words that you don't need to know less often, depending on how you grade them. And it's just a fantastic way to not be writing lists of vocab, wasting your time, memorizing lists of vocab, when all you have to do is put it into this app and keep immersing. And the more you see the words in the app, and the more the words keep coming up in your immersion, the more they're going to stick, and it's going to become natural to you. So that's active immersion. Free flow immersion is where you are, again, you're fully concentrating on it, but you're not sentence mining. So it's just free flow. You're not stopping, pausing, looking up words, looking up the meaning, putting them into Anki and all the rest of it. You're just free flow, letting it wash over you. The third type is passive immersion. Passive immersion is where you are not actively concentrating on it. You kind of are and you're kind of not. Your attention's split. That's for when you're doing, like mundane tasks, when you're washing the dishes or driving, just, anything where you can't fully concentrate on it. And all these three types of immersion, they have their place. And like I said, you have to use them tactically. So you have to think, right, active immersion is the one that's going to take the most brain power and effort. So when should I do that? However, active immersion is the most effective. So you have to factor that in as well. It's the most effective, but it takes the most amount of effort and brain power. Then you've got free flow immersion, which is effective, but it takes less brain power. So that could be at a time when you want to kind of just like chill, but you still want to be like benefiting from your time. So you can be immersing, maybe watching something, but you're not sentence mining. So that's when you can do free flow. Then passive is basically any other times than that. So when you're doing other tasks, but you can have something on in the background, that's perfect time for passive immersion. It's not as effective, but it's still effective. You're still going to be partly in and out listening to it, and it'll be, you'll be picking it up. So if you haven't noticed, the immersion method, or the acquisition and learning method, is based heavily upon input. Like I said, listening, reading, anything you take in. And this is how you learn as a child. A child, he doesn't make up his native language. He mimics it. He copies what he hears. So from your parents, or from the TV, or from society, you mimic the language. That's why when someone says something wrong in your native language, you know it's wrong, but you don't know why it's wrong, because you've just acquired it. So input before output is the natural way of learning. You understand the language, then you start to produce the language. And this, a lot of people get backwards. Traditionally, these days, a heavy emphasis is upon speaking. You need to be able to speak. They get you practicing speaking from the beginning. And I'm not talking about, reading a book with your teacher, going through like a program. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about you actively then trying to form your own sentences and speak. This, in my opinion, is a massive mistake, because it's only going to create bad habits and mistakes that are going to be ingrained. The more you keep saying things wrong and saying things wrong and saying things wrong, you're going to ingrain those, and they're going to be really hard to change later on. So this acquisition and learning of the language and input before output, it gives you a strong subconscious model of the language that is actually accurate to the language. And this is what I touched upon earlier, meaning that if you, for example, in Arabic, if you wanted to say, where are you from? If you knew in Arabic how to say where, you would say aina. You know, is anta. And from, is min. So if you were to just assume how to say this in Arabic, you would say aina anta min. Aina anta min. Where are you from? This is wrong. In Arabic you say min aina anta. Literally, from where you. It's completely mashed up compared to how we would say it as an English speaker. So when I say you have a strong subconscious model of the language that is accurate to the language and has not been influenced by your native language bias, this is what I mean by input before output. This is what it creates. You basically say what you know is correct because you've heard it so much. So in my opinion, you should wait until you've got a fairly decent understanding of the language before you then start to produce the language from yourself. This, might seem counterintuitive to a lot of people. They would say, well, to get good at speaking, you have to practice speaking. Which is true, you do, but there's a time for it. I'm saying, wait a bit, get your understanding strong enough, make sure you've heard the language a lot, and then when you start to produce the language, you'll find it a lot more easier, you'll sound a lot more natural, and you'll make a lot less mistakes. There are different techniques as well that come within like the immersion method to start outputting and to work on your output. There's techniques like shadowing, there's techniques like having a language parent, and there's many others as well. But in this video, I'm just going to focus on the input for now, and inshallah in the future, I will focus on the output. So that's it for this video, guys. If you do want to learn Arabic, I'll put my email in the description below. Just send me an email. I'd love to help as many of you as possible learn the Arabic language. Assalamu alaikum.